So for the past 25 days, there has been a protest camp set up behind me right out here. This place is called Thacker Pass. We're in northern Nevada, traditional territory of the northern Paiute and the western Shoshone. And this area right back here is the proposed site of an open pit lithium mine, a massive strip mine that would turn everything that you can see back here into a heavily industrialized zone. This site right now is an incredibly beautiful, biodiverse sagebrush habitat. There's sagebrush plants over 100 years old out here. This is old growth sage. There's sage grouse. This is part of the most important sage grouse population left in the entire state. Something like 5 to 8% of the entire global population of sage grouse live right in this area right here. This is a migratory corridor for pronghorn. One of the members of the occupation just yesterday saw about 55 pronghorn over on the far side of the pass here in an area that would be destroyed for this open pit mine. There are golden eagles here, multiple nesting pairs in this area. We've seen them circling overhead. We've seen their mating flights, getting ready to lay their eggs in the spring. There are pygmy rabbits here. There are burrowing owls here. There are gopher snakes and rattlesnakes. There's rabbit brush. There's jackrabbits. There's peregrine falcons, or actually the desert variant of the peregrine falcon, what's known as the prairie falcon. There are mule deer. We see them feeding up on these hills right here, coming down. There are ringtails living in these cliffs behind me. There are red foxes. There are kangaroo mice. There are an incredible variety of creatures who live here, many of whom I don't know their names. And all this is under threat to create an open pit mine for lithium, to mine lithium for electric car batteries and for grid energy storage to power this green energy transition. I'm not a fan of fossil fuels. I'm not a promoter of fossil fuels. I've taken direct action for many years against fossil fuels. I fought the tar sands in Canada. I fought tar sands pipelines here in the US. I fought natural gas pipelines, methane pipelines. I've stood on top of heavy equipment to block tar sands fossil fuel mining in Utah. I've stood in front of coal trains to stop them from moving forward, to try and blockade the industry. I've fought the fossil fuel industry for many, many years, and I will continue to do so. And what we need to recognize is that this so-called green energy transition that is being promoted is not a real solution. And that's why we're out here on the land, because this is the place that is at stake right now. This is the place that is up to be sacrificed for the sake of this so-called green energy. It was about 175 years ago that the colonization of this region really began in earnest. That was when the first European settlers started coming across into Nevada and really setting up shop out here, the mid-1800s. And they mostly came for the mineral wealth. They came for the gold, the silver. They came for mining. Nevada has been a mining state from the very beginning, and mining still controls this state. And, I've spoken with some of my Shoshone friends, my Goshute friends, about the history of this invasion for mining. And what happened was the settlers came and they forced the indigenous people onto reservations, and they cut down the juniper trees and the pinyon pine trees. And these were the main sources of medicine and food for many of the Great Basin indigenous peoples. I've heard it said that the pinyon pine were like the buffalo to the indigenous people out here. Myron Dewey said that. And so, just like in the Great Plains, the settlers destroyed the food supply of the indigenous people, and they forced them to participate in the colonial economy using this violence. They forced them to participate in the capitalist system, in the mining system, in the ranching system, because people were going to starve otherwise. And so what happened in the mid-1800s was men with guns came for the mountains, and they started digging them out and blowing them up and turning mountains into money and carting that money away and leaving behind a wasteland. And that's what's been happening in Nevada ever since. It hasn't stopped. And that's what we're going to see here, unless it's stopped. The Lithium Americas Corporation, Canadian mining company that wants to build this mine over here, they raised $400 million in one day a few weeks ago to try and build this mine. Meanwhile, the grassroots resistance to this project struggles to raise a few $1,000s to help support people coming out here, camping, getting supplies, getting the things we need, travel to get people here. The camp is right down there. I don't know if you can see it on this video. It's pretty small. It's about a mile and a half from where I'm standing right now. There's about 7 or 8 people down there at the moment. We need more people to come out to camp. We need more people to join us here, to draw the line, to hold the line against this mining project. And it's not just about this project here. You know, I was on a panel discussion recently with some folks from the Andean Altiplano, what's called the Lithium Triangle in South America. Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile have this high desert region where the 3 countries meet that contains about half the world's lithium reserves. Lithium mining has been going on there for decades at this point, and it's left behind a wasteland. Indigenous people have been kicked off their lands, they've been dispossessed, their lands have been poisoned, the water has been taken. The water use is one of the major issues there because it's an extremely dry place. Just like here, Nevada is the driest state in the US, and they want to pump 1.4 billion gallons of water out of that valley over there up to this spot and use it to refine the lithium into their final product. 1.4 billion gallons a year. The Quinn River over in that valley is already dry. The water is already being overused. You go back 200 years and there would be water there. There would be beaver dams, there would be fish, there would be wildlife in abundance. This land is already in a degraded state compared to where it used to be, compared to where it needs to be. The atrocities associated with this mine go on and on. This is an important cultural site for the indigenous peoples of this region. This has been a travel corridor through what's now called Thacker Pass for thousands and thousands of years, an important gathering site. If you walk across these lands out here, there's obsidian everywhere across the ground. There's all kinds of flakes on the other side of this valley behind me, where indigenous peoples would gather the obsidian and use it to make tools. This has been an important place for thousands of years. The Shoshone signed a treaty, but they never ceded their land to the United States. This is unceded land. The Western Shoshone never gave away their land, and the U.S. does not have legal title to this land. And the U.S. government rejects that. They have appropriated something like $175 million and set it aside to give to the Western Shoshone if they will agree that the land was given to the United States. And the Shoshone, the Western Shoshone, have said no. We won't take your money. We want the land. They've been fighting this fight for decades. This is unceded territory. This land doesn't belong to the Bureau of Land Management. This land doesn't belong to the federal government. This land belongs to the inhabitants of this land. People whose ancestors are in the soil. And I don't just mean humans. This land belongs to the sagebrush and the pygmy rabbits and all the other beings who have called it home for generation after generation after generation. Why don't their voices get a say? Why don't we take their preferences into account? What do you think they would say if we asked them, Can we blow this place up? If Lithium Americas showed up and sincerely asked the burrowing owls and the sage grouse and the coyotes and the pronghorn antelope, can we blow up your home? Can we blow it up? Can we turn it into dust? Can we bathe the ground in sulfuric acid to extract this lithium, which we will take away and use to make people rich, leaving behind a wasteland? Do we have your permission to do this? What do you think the land would say? What do you think the inhabitants of this place would say? Do you think they would say, this is green? Do you think they would say, this is how you save the planet? By destroying our home? I think this is an important issue, not just because of what's happening right here, but because of what it means, because of what it symbolizes. When I was a young person, I was very concerned about what was happening to the planet. I was very concerned about the ecological crisis, the rainforest being chopped down, global warming, ocean acidification, the hole in the ozone layer. I care about these things. I've cared about them ever since I was a little kid. It's hard to be a human being and have a heart and not care about them unless you've been broken in some way. And so I wanted to figure out what could be done. So I started reading about these issues. And of course, what I was taught from a very young age was that solar panels and electric cars were going to save the world. That's what I learned. That's what the green media taught me. They taught me that it's okay to sacrifice places like this, implicitly. They taught me it's okay to sacrifice places like this if it means we can have electric cars instead of fossil fuel cars. But we don't need cars at all. That's the thing. And this is a hard message for people to hear because people don't want to be told no. We're not used to being told no in this culture. You can't have that. It's not okay for us to continue in this way. We're not used to that message. We're used to getting whatever we want whenever we want it. And you know, that's for the most part across the board. The average person in American society lives with something like the energy equivalent of 100 slaves. We live a life of luxury like we had 100 slaves working for us 24 hours a day. That's what fossil fuels has brought to the modern era. That's what this energy glut has brought to us, is this mindset where we can have whatever we want whenever we want it. That's something we need to get over. That's something we need to change. You know, for the past 5 or 6 years, I was working on a book called Bright Green Lies: How the Environmental Movement Lost Its Way and What We Can Do About It. And my co-authors and I in this book really dive into these problems with so-called green technologies in detail. Things like solar panels, wind turbines, electric cars, energy storage, batteries. And not only these things, but a lot of the other solutions that are accepted as dogma in the environmental movement. Things like dense urbanization. We debunk these things in the book. These things are not going to save the planet. We can't get around the problems that we have found ourselves in. We're in a conundrum. This culture has dug itself into a very deep hole, and a lot is going to need to change before we'll find ourselves even approaching some semblance of sustainability, of sanity, of justice, of living in a good way. Earlier, came around the corner in the mountains over there, and it just felt like a punch in the gut because I had the premonition of coming around that corner and no longer seeing this swath, this rolling expanse of old-growth sagebrush here, but of seeing an open pit, of seeing a mountain of tailings, of mine waste, of toxified soil. I had this premonition of seeing a gigantic sulfuric acid plant and processing facilities all through what is now wild, where the foxes run down there, where the snakes slither between the sagebrush, where the golden eagles wheel overhead. That's why I'm here to fight. Because I don't want to see this turn into an industrial wasteland. And I don't think many of us do. You know, I think, yes, a lot of people are befuddled, confused by all these bright green lies. A lot of people buy into this crap. But a lot of people don't. A lot of people understand that we need to scale down. A lot of people understand that we need to reduce our energy consumption, that we need to degrow the economy, that the latest and greatest industrial technology is not going to save us magically, that this isn't a tooth fairy situation where electric cars will appear under our pillows and save the day. A lot of people understand this. And that's why, for me, a big part of the battle is not just education. A big part of the battle is power. A big part of the battle is actually stopping them.